Let me start by saying, right up front and with no rancor, that I know I performed poorly earlier this year in my debate with archaeologist Flint Dibble on the Joe Rogan Experience. That's JRE 2136 of April 16th, 2024. Flint is a better debater than me.
Man.
He was better prepared than me. His ability to deliver what he had prepared far outmatched my own, and he was faster on his feet than I was. So kudos to Flint for his performance, on which I congratulate him.
So I don't know as much about Graham Hancock as you do, Gavin, so you can kind of enlighten all of us. I tend to think of him as a crank, but a crank that was kind of fun to listen to while I was stoned delivering pizza on the Joe Rogan Experience. So not a nefarious crank, not a pernicious crank necessarily. Like I don't get like anti-vax sends off like a weird thing because it's like you're jeopardizing somebody's health. I don't care if you think the pyramids were brought by aliens. That doesn't hurt anybody. You know what I mean? That's not going to impact somebody's, modern life. They might buy a book about it that's also full of shit, but really, what harm does that do? I remember it was a big moment when he got, I would say some people called it humiliated. I didn't watch the whole thing. I just watched a couple of really poor looking segments of him on Twitter. But yeah, I think that's what this is going to be kind of in reference to, right, Gavin? His most recent appearance on the JRE?
Yeah, it was actually about 5 months ago, I think.
Okay.
And Graham Hancock went on Joe Rogan to debate his theories with an actual mainstream archaeologist, this guy named Flint. Debate was fascinating, over 4 hours long. I genuinely recommend you guys all listen to the conversation. Even if you're not as interested in archaeology as I am, I think it's a genuinely good discussion about the merits of this sort of like, infotainment, pseudoscience
jacket.
I know. I need to bring my hat. But either way, I do think that this conversation on the Joe Rogan platform, not only did it harken back to a previous era of the Joe Rogan Experience that Zach and I both share a real appreciation for, despite our
before it sucked.
Yeah, exactly. Back before it sucked, right? We talk about this a lot. The more Joe Rogan gets political, the cringier it is. Especially when he just has on like some lackey comedian type to give political takes. It never ends well. But where he really does excel is talking about aliens, talking about psychedelic drugs, talking about theories like the ones Graham Hancock espouses. And obviously Graham Hancock's an interesting guy. He's definitely become a straight up celebrity. And that's mostly thanks to the Joe Rogan platform. He's one of these people that 10 years ago, before his exposure on the Joe Rogan Experience, was not a household name. Some people knew about him. Maybe some people had his books or some shit like that.
Very few people, though, dude. That guy was early stages of JRE before he was just like an instant, kingmaker.
Exactly. And Joe really blew him up, and not just blew him up, but ultimately got him a Netflix deal. Graham Hancock took his theories to Netflix with a show called Ancient Apocalypse, I believe, which has been widely disavowed by the archaeological community, the scientific community.
Who cares, though? That's fun.
Right. Well, I agree. I'm a fan of Graham Hancock. I enjoy his content as much as the next man. I'm not here to, pearl clutch about it. I agree with you. It's not really all that pernicious to dabble in this sort of conspiracy theory. It's kind of like, talking about Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster. That's kind of how I feel about it. And although some people will point out some of the Atlantis myths have their roots in white supremacy and trying to deny cultures the ownership of their own architecture, trying to deny that indigenous people were responsible for the archaeological and architectural wonders that they did in fact create. There are problematic aspects to this whole genre. I don't think Graham Hancock really dabbles too heavily in that sort of stuff. I don't think he is a racist person or intentionally, trying to signal boost anyone that is. But recently, he has come out to share some thoughts about how he did in that debate from about 4 years ago, the debate which, quite frankly, destroyed his credibility on the national.
You mean 4 months ago?
Yeah, what'd I say?
Oh, you said 4 years ago, but then
sorry, 4 months ago. Yeah, the debate, which, like I said, basically did destroy Hancock's credibility. I think that this debate, like I said, very entertaining. What it undeniably exposed is that Graham Hancock is a pseudoscientist, that he does not actually have any evidence to back up his claims about a lost civilization, a sort of Atlantean civilization. And that's just exposed in undeniable detail over and over again by an actual scientist, a real archaeologist, this guy, Flint Dibble. And before we take a look at this recent clip from Graham Hancock, where he basically admits that he got destroyed in that debate, I wanted to quickly play this clip from the debate itself 4 months ago, where Graham, after realizing that he's lost the intellectual battle, resorts to more of a culture war appeal in a desperate attempt to save himself and to get the audience, Joe Rogan's audience, back on his side, again, knowing he's been totally exposed, totally destroyed. So let's take a look at this, about a 1 minute clip, 2 minute clip maybe, and then we'll take a look at Graham's recent statement, I think kind of breaking his silence on this debate. And as I said, admitting that it was not a good look for him. So interested in your opinion on this, Zac.
Yeah, let's watch. I have not seen this clip yet.
This is probably one of the worst looks from Graham. Like I said, I like Graham overall.
Me
I think
too,
he's
and
fun.
I'm surprised to hear that he kind of goes for the culture war thing, because one of the things I was about to add to you, Gavin, was in his, theories about the past, he actually always centers like Göbekli Tepe, Mesopotamia, right? This is not white culture. He's not saying it actually came from England.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, no, of course not. That would be ridiculous. That would be ludicrous, but I hear how the more pernicious examples of that, and now unfortunately to have him lean into culture war stuff. I will reserve my judgment though until after we play this clip.
Yeah, I'm interested in your opinion on this. Let's take a look.
I can bring up some imagery on that.
Okay.
And perhaps we'll do that next. But I would just love to just complete this little point that I want to make here, which is the influence of Flint and his colleagues on media and culture. And again, we've got the Society for American Archaeology, 5,000 members. Flint is one. Flint's co-author, John Hoops, actually helped to write this letter for the Society of American Archaeology. They're saying that I embolden extreme voices that misrepresent archaeological knowledge in order to spread false historical narratives that are overtly misogynistic, chauvinistic, racist, and anti-Semitic. I mean, you apply those labels to somebody and you're going to get that person hated by a lot of people.
Whole ball.
Yeah,
I did not write that.
No, your
not write
co-author,
that.
John Hoops, wrote it. We urge Netflix to add disclaimers that the content is unfounded. They want it to be called science fiction. In other words, that's a very clever way of canceling me.
No.
Cancel culture at work.
Go back to that. Why would
and
someone...
here's Flint.
Graham, you're
Here's
so
Flint.
much more of a celebrity than me.
Here's Flint. Netflix. Correct. I'm
Come
sorry.
on.
I'm sorry that I am Flint. That's not really my problem. Hey,
I have
Netflix.
this
Sounds like
Hey,
such
Netflix,
abuse.
correct your mistake and reclassify Ancient Apocalypse as fantasy. Netflix corrects your mistakes. This is you pushing this, Flint. And then the general media
tiny
fishy
Twitter
Netflix
account?
show, Ancient Apocalypse, is the most dangerous show on Netflix. You used the word dangerous
Where?
repeatedly in your conversation piece.
I don't think so. I don't think I've ever called you dangerous, Graham. I've not called you these things. You're misinterpreting me.
You don't think I'm dangerous? You don't think that...
I think that the way that you refer to archaeology as, you say that you're number one enemy of archaeology and things like that, you are promoting people to dislike what we do. We are doing our jobs. No, you started off Ancient Apocalypse by calling us patronizing and arrogant.
Archaeologists see me as public enemy number one.
But
That's
you
exactly
started
what
off
I
by
said.
saying we're not sitting around thinking about you. Most of my dad's colleagues, when I mentioned I'm coming on here to do this, they had no idea you talk about the Ice Age. They
I'm
thought you
speaking
talked
of
about
archaeologists
pyramids.
like you, Flint, who see me as public enemy number one and who have quite a
you,
substantial outreach in the media.
A horrible look.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. No, off the bat look right there. When this guy, he clearly, as we'll circle back to later, he's not the only one in this episode, but he was clearly the guy who, in archaeological world, he was picked last at kickball, right? You know what I mean? He was not the kind of guy that had a bunch of friends. It didn't come easy to him. And so he was like, you know what? I'm going to go the other way. When mainstream archaeology is going this way, I'm going to go this way. And I'm going to keep a sliver of mainstream archaeology, right? But other than that, I am mostly going to indulge in like whatever the pseudoscience version of fan fiction is. And I actually don't mind that. I actually will come out here and give a full-throated defense for that. However, yeah, you know what? If people want to say this is scientifically unfounded, you know what I mean? If people want to say that the entire archaeological community rejects this, that's also their right. The thing about people who are like, I'm a free speech warrior, I want all the free speech. And it's like, yeah, dude, that also means the free speech to call you an idiot. Right. That also means the free speech to say, hey, dude, the ideas that you're pushing are completely cranked. They're bullshit.
They're
all right?
lies.
It's,
Yeah.
it's complete poppycock, to use some language he'd be familiar with over across the pond, right? It's a nothing burger.
Yep.
And while it can be fun to think about, go back Lake Tepe and wow, dude, what was really lost in the Library of Alexandria? Okay, Gavin and I used to sit in my Pontiac Grand Prix and hit an MFLB Magic Flight launch box and get high out of our minds when we were in high school. This is the kind of stupid shit we were talking about. Like, you ever heard of the stoned ape theory, man? You know what I mean? That's fun.
Yep.
Is there any truth to it? No.
And speaking of stoned ape theory, I actually think that Terrence McKenna is someone who's in a similar category as Graham Hancock. I think Terrence McKenna is far smarter than Graham Hancock. Like, I think his actual contributions as a scientist were more impressive, but I still think he falls into a similar realm of someone that you have to kind of take with a big grain of salt. Definitely entertaining to listen to, but probably not always 100% rooted in fact. I agree. Graham Hancock, like I said, very entertaining person, and I don't have any issue with the kind of content that he creates. Same with the ancient alien stuff, despite some of the more problematic roots to these theories, because of the fact that it does actually get people involved in and interested in archaeology, history, science. Like, a lot of people, they just find this stuff boring, and it does kind of give them a gateway in. It's like, oh, let's talk about crystal skulls and, pyramids and shit like that. And then eventually you'll actually get interested in the real history here. So I think it's interesting. And I do wish that some people in the mainstream archaeology community, that they didn't treat Graham Hancock so aggressively for the reason I just said. I think they need to kind of look at him more like an ally than an enemy. Even though he talks so much shit on their academia, he still is kind of getting a lot more people interested in that, study than I feel like they otherwise would be. In the same way that the Indiana Jones series, obviously those are not an accurate depiction of archaeology, but it got a ton of people into archaeology. A ton of archaeologists, grown adult archaeologists, got into it because of the Indiana Jones.
That was
movies.
like the entire 1980s, right? How many kids signed up for karate classes after Daniel LaRusso did
Exactly.
the train, right? If do right, no can defend, right? That's not a karate move.
Yeah.
Okay, do you know how easy it is to defend against a crane? Pretty easy. I'm going to charge you and tackle you. That's over now. You're not going to kick me in the face. I'm going to put my hands up like this, and I'm going to shoot a takedown on you, right?
Yep.
But 1980s America, no way. Everybody wants to be the next Karate Kid or whatever, right?
Exactly. Either way, let's take a look here. Graham Hancock finally has broken the silence, and he's come out here to address his debate performance. Like I said, we watched a very quick, 1 minute clip from that debate. I genuinely do recommend that you guys watch the entirety of it. It's not all quite as dramatic and awkward as the clip that I showed you. Most of it really is Graham Hancock being exposed. Flint Dibble over and over again proves that Graham has no proof for his theories, that he's completely unable to provide any actual shred of scientific evidence to support his claims. Graham has nothing to show for it, which is why eventually he has to try to move the debate from the realm of academia and science into the realm of the culture war. Either way, before we move on, guys, let's just take a look at Graham Hancock addressing the situation and admitting defeat, frankly.
Let me start by saying, right up front and with no rancor, that I know I performed poorly earlier this year in my debate with archaeologist Flint Dibble on the Joe Rogan Experience. That's JRE 2136 of April 16th, 2024. Flint is a better debater than me.
Man. Shit.
He was better prepared than me. His ability to deliver what he had prepared far outmatched my own, and he was faster on his feet than I was. So kudos to Flint for his performance, on which I congratulate him. Indeed, I did congratulate him in an email I sent him a few hours after the debate, where I wrote, "It was good to talk to you today. You speak well for your cause. I was impressed." Throughout our confrontation, I took Flint at face value as an archaeologist passionately opposed to my views on prehistory, who'd come to the table to discuss his differences with me. I took it for granted that his knowledge of archaeology would be superior to my own and would be presented with complete transparency. So when Flint made seemingly authoritative statements concerning supposedly solid archaeological data that I had no prior knowledge of,
Anyway, then he spends the next 55 minutes nitpicking Flint and bringing up a bunch of stuff that actually wasn't technically true. Flint said there was 30,000 shipwrecks discovered, but actually it wasn't quite as many. It was only an estimated 30,000, some weird stuff like that. Totally desperate. But I did think it was pretty funny that at least at the very beginning there, he admits, yeah, I got absolutely destroyed in that debate. Flint totally showed my ass. And I mean, he has to regret doing it. He has to regret engaging with a serious academic, because it's one thing to be a confident performer, pseudoscience educator, or whatever you want to call a guy like Graham Hancock. But when you're actually sitting across from a serious academic, a serious scientist for 4 hours, I mean, there's just no way you can trick that person. This is not a normal person that lacks the context, which makes them vulnerable to these sort of conspiratorial ideas and rabbit holes. When you're talking to someone who does have the context and can point out what you're purposefully omitting to spin your yarns, that's when it all falls apart. And like I said, guys, I genuinely recommend you guys watch the full 4-hour debate on the Joe Rogan Experience. It really is one of the most interesting conversations you'll ever see between a real scientist and a pseudoscientist, quite frankly. Like I said, even though I enjoy Graham, I think it's fair to call him that.
Oh, 100% he's a pseudoscientist. I think even that he is more of like a fiction writer. He's kind of like a fantasist, you know? He's the kind of guy that will, like Dan Brown, right? Dan Brown, he'll go and do a bunch of real research on the Freemasons. He'll go and do some real work on, oh, wow, this is a really interesting historical tidbit on the Sistine Chapel, right? Let me look into that. And then he'll just, wow, wouldn't it be crazy if this were the reality behind it? Graham Hancock does the same thing. He'll be like, wow, there's a bunch of really ancient, art that we predates what we even thought possible, and Göbekli Tepe. Wouldn't it be interesting if actually computers were already invented and we'd gone all the way through the current stage of evolution in the past, only to be regressed after war and the burning of the Library of Alexandria? And he's like, yes, bro, I'm waxing right now. I'm going to sell a bunch of books to people who watch the Joe Rogan Experience for a living. And Joe Rogan got his hands on one of those books, right? Joe Rogan's the same guy that was like, yeah, I picked up a copy of Dianetics. I was really into self-improvement. Okay, so this is the kind of critical thinker that Graham Hancock's looking for, right? Has him on blast his status into, almost borderline mainstream with the Netflix special. I think you could argue, as far as archaeology goes, 100% the mainstream. So you could totally see why this legitimate scientist, this guy that's devoted his entire life, and by the sound of it, his father has also devoted his entire life. The dude's name's Flint. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Clearly, he wants the record to be correct. So while it's easy for me as a shit talker back here, I could be like, I don't give a f. Like, yeah, the aliens invented the.
That was your whole life's work.
Right,
you'd be like, bro, like that's actually not true.
Bro, don't tell people that. Do you know what actually happened? It's like when people say that dinosaurs never existed. I'm like, well, that's a pretty harmless conspiracy theory. I'd rather have people running around with that instead of like Jews control the weather. Yeah. But, if I was a paleontologist, I'd be like, what the f, dude? Dinosaurs 100% existed. You know what I mean?
Yep. Either way, thank you guys, including you, Zach. Thank you for indulging me in that segment. I'm a big fan of this sort of subsect of the internet, the crazy sort of alternative archaeology, alternative history, ancient aliens kind of stuff. I've always been into it. So I do appreciate the opportunity to talk about this a little bit on the Vanguard. And I think that as a final note, a lot of people in Joe Rogan's comment section, they share our opinions, Zach. They also feel like the golden age of Joe Rogan was when he had these kind of conversations more, when he talked to more people like Graham Hancock, when he talked more about, history and stuff like that, had on interesting people, even sometimes that were cranks, right? Still easily the best kind of content he puts out. And if you look at the comments here, it seems like a lot of people really seem to agree. This guy says 2 hours in, and I'm now fairly convinced nerd battles should become a regular feature.
They used to be.
Yeah, they used to be. This is like the best thing about Joe Rogan, this kind of content, not like bizarre, crazy culture war stuff. Not like, did you hear that Tim Walz turned the Minnesota flag into the Somali flag? Like stupid, divisive crap like that.
My friend's wife works at a nursery school, and they're making all the kids shit and piss in litter boxes. Yeah. I swear to God, one of them identifies as a cat. Now they all have to identify as a cat. They changed the mascot to the peeing lions. You know what I mean? Anyway, yeah.